What's up YouTube, Jason here with Bite My Bits. If you play City Skylines, you may be wondering, what does it take to maximize your population density? Well, today, we're going to find that out. To start things off, this is not done in vanilla. I had to make use of a few mods just to make this video as accurate as I could. Let me explain a little bit on that. I used unlimited money to design a city completely at the start. I ran a test simulation after building it just to make sure that everything flowed correctly. I wasn't interested in balancing books or achieving anything. This was only just for testing purposes. Then I used an automatic bulldozer mod to keep things consistent throughout every video without having to move around or find buildings myself. I didn't want any kind of a delay on my end to affect the end results. That mod helped me do it. I threw in the full demand mod that does not affect the population density, but it encourages people to move in anywhere where there's available spots. This does not affect the end results, but it does speed up the process tremendously. I did try to do this without the mod, but it took a lot longer and thus increased the Fraps file size beyond what I could manage. To make sure that this didn't affect the end results though, I did run two tests, one with and one without the mod with the exact same setup. In the end, I had a difference of about 2,000 people. Close enough. Now, if you've searched Google on how to grow your population on City Skylines, you may have found a few mixed messages. Some people say that uneducated people breed more, you need to build these, or you have to have that. Really, I saw no conclusion on to what was the best way to set up the highest density buildings. Well, for this test, I made sure that every run had the exact same setup with the same zoning. The biggest difference would only be the added residential zones that would have otherwise been used by the items that I took out for the test. I did it like this because if those items were not present, nobody would just leave them unzoned. It just doesn't make sense. Again, this is not to achieve vanilla gameplay. This is only to find out what gives the best population density. Alright, starting out I had a completely built custom map with full schools, parks, unique buildings, and monuments. I did not include any public transportation or docks. I had a decent amount of commercial and office space available and made sure that traffic flowed without any major pileups. Because I wanted an accurate and consistent test, the population of the first build really is not relevant. So I dezoned everything, rezoned it close to what I had before, and saved the game to keep it as a base platform to be used for all further tests. Every test here is ran until population growth becomes stagnant. First up, I removed all schools throughout the entire map. I did this based off of the internet assumption that dumb people breed more and thus would increase population density. Well, in roughly 33 minutes, I topped out at about 113,000 people. This was interesting and everything, but then I thought, maybe if I split the map and have one side educated and the other not, I would find a better population balance and thus increase my density. Well, I reset everything and added schools to half of the map, ran it for about 40 minutes before it topped out, and ended up with 165,000 people. That's 52,000 more people just from adding education to half the map. I then had to know what would happen if I went with full out education. Resetting the simulation again, making sure the entire map had access to schools, I then ran it for 48 minutes before it capped. I found this to be a little interesting because it took longer, but it actually made sense because I ended up with 212,000 people. So, as it turns out, fully educated people net a population density return of almost twice as much. Interesting. Now that I know that education is the best route, I had to find out what effect parks have. So, I kept the same amount of schools, removed the parks, and ran it for about the same time as I did before. But this time, I ended up with only 200,000 people. Considering I had more zoning for residential from the missing parks and the population still dropped, then I would say that even though it was a small amount, it still affected the density in a negative way. But what about monuments and those unique buildings? I still had those when I removed the parks. Well, to keep this simple, I reset it again, kept the parks, but then removed every unique building that I had. Running it for almost an hour this time, I topped out at 217,000 people. Wow. That's 5,000 more people than I had with unique buildings. I can almost say that the unique buildings had little to no effect on population density, but the increase I saw was only from the extra zoning I got from the removed buildings. I was actually pretty surprised by this result. Just for kicks, I wanted to compare the results without any schools, and in 36 minutes I ended up with about 114,000 people, keeping the difference consistent with the results I had with schools. At this point, I have found that the best way to maximize your population density is to have full schools, full parks, and no unique buildings. The problem is I have a burning question that I set myself up with from the beginning. What effect does public transportation have on population? I mean, that's a good question, right? So for my final test, I went back to having full schools, taking out all unique buildings, keeping the parks, adding bus stations, and multiple bus routes that span the entire maps. Running for about 52 minutes, this new simulation maxed out at a staggering 226,000 people, proving that the bus system did have an added benefit to the population by adding 9,000 people. Cool. I plan on expanding more on this in my next video using the exact same setup, but this time with different amounts of trains, buses, and docks. It's going to be interesting to find out just how much of each affects the population. As always, if you found this video useful, drop me a like below, and don't forget to subscribe.